stigma, unfair treatment, and even civil rights violations in relation to people with mental health conditions. Our hope today is to have a conversation about these concerns, and we're really pleased to welcome State Representative Paul Heroux as our guest. Representative Heroux is State Representative for Attleboro. He sits on the Joint Committee for Mental Health and Substance Abuse, and also the Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities Committee. He has a bachelor's degree in psychology and neuroscience from USC, a master's in criminology from the University of Pennsylvania, where he received a leadership award in criminology, and he's got a master's in public administration from Harvard, where he was nominated for the Robert Kennedy Award for Excellence in Public Service for his work with seniors, youth, and prison reform advocacy. Please join me in welcoming Representative Heroux.
Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Very good. I tend to speak very softly. Yeah, I have a lot of education behind me, but what she didn't mention is that I owe $150,000 in student debt because of that education. So there's a downside to that as well. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's a real honor to be here. And I have a long history with mental health as an interest of mine. I used to work with 5 to 12-year-old kids for about 7 years, and a lot of those kids had ADHD, conduct disorder, PTSD, depression. And what came of that was that I was doing my bachelor's in psychology at the same time, and I wanted to go off and do a PhD in clinical psychology, but unfortunately I got rejected to every program I applied to. It's probably the best, and I owe more money. So what I've been doing though, after working with kids, I worked overseas for a while, but then I worked in prison and jail, and there was a very large mental health population within prison and jail. And right as I went back to school for my last degree, I also started writing for the Huffington Post. And when I was writing for the Huffington Post, I would write about crime, I'd write about the economy, but I also wrote about mental health and mental illness. And whenever I write about articles with this is when all of a sudden I would get just inundated with emails pouring in from across the country with people saying, geez, thank you so much for raising this issue. One article I wrote about was depression in children, and a lot of people would say, oh, why do kids have to be depressed about their kids? And it was quite a lot they could be. Other times it was depression in men. That one got a lot of circulation. I also, actually, today I brought just 3 of my articles that I'm kind of going to talk a little bit about today. There's a pile of them in the back of the room, I believe. One of them was, why do we stigmatize this being mental health or mental illness? And so that's kind of the direction I'm going to go in with this today. And basically, historically the civil rights movements have always focused on race, religion, gender, persons with disabilities. And now I think there's a new civil rights movement. We're just kind of finishing. Massachusetts is sort of wrapping up the civil rights movement with marriage equality, but now I still see nationally there's another one, and that is with mental illness and mental health, and the need to stop stigmatizing this. So, basically, since Newtown, there has been a lot of focus on folks with mental illness. They said, okay, this person might be suffering from recent break with schizophrenia, or recent onset, or a manic episode of bipolar disorder. And the way the discussion is being talked about, particularly by the NRA, and actually that's one of the other articles I wrote, was criticizing Wayne LaPierre because the day after a couple days after he went on Meet the Press, Newtown I believe was on a Friday, and then he went on Meet the Press Sunday morning, I think it was, and he said, we got to keep the guns out of the hands of these lunatics and these nuts. And I just found that to be an extremely ignorant and insensitive way to look at it. But the idea that we need to keep the guns out of the hands of people living with, or afflicted with mental illness, is kind of, it's not a sophisticated view. And we have about 45% of the population, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, I use this statistic all the time, 45% of the population have been or are afflicted with mental illness at some point in their life. It could be something temporary, postpartum depression, it could be something more chronic, like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. But if we're talking about 45% of the population, and it's roughly about 26% in the past year, right off the bat, this is where I don't think NRA folks and gun folks have really thought this discussion through very much. But they're automatically going to exclude almost half the population. And what they're doing though is they're just looking for a group to blame and a group to demonize. And with the stigma and surrounding mental health and mental illness, it's almost like nobody wants to get up and say, or not nobody, but very few people want to get up and say, no, don't pick on folks with mental illness. And it's a vulnerable population. And I'm going to talk about what we can do later. But just this past weekend, I was sitting down with a friend of mine who I've known for a long time, and when I write articles, I post them on Facebook for get circulation and stuff for my friends to read. But one friend wrote to me and sent me a little message through Facebook and said, "Hey, can we meet sometime? I never told anybody this. Only my family members know, but I have bipolar disorder." She's 36 years old. She was diagnosed, I think, when she was about 30 or 31 years old. So just this past weekend, we sat down and we talked about 2 hours. And I will be writing an article on what it's like for a woman who is 36 years old to be going through a divorce with 3 kids and living with bipolar disorder, successfully living with bipolar disorder, because she has her act together. I mean, she's had a few episodes where literally she would contemplate and even plan out what it was like, like what she would do to go hang herself. She would also talk about when she was in high school, how she was cutting, and it wasn't that she wanted to hurt herself, she just wanted to feel something. So one of the concerns that she talked about though is that as she's going through this divorce, how is she gonna ever find somebody again who she could have to be a life partner with? The way she phrases it is that 36 years old, I have 3 kids. That's not a problem. I could find a husband if I wanted to, or a boyfriend. But who's going to take somebody with bipolar disorder? It's just, if you ever saw this girl, she's absolutely beautiful. She's gorgeous, and she's smart. But she has this fear of the stigma. So what I said to her was, and this isn't any clinical advice, it's just me speaking off the cuff, kind of like I'm doing right now. It was just, anytime you meet a guy, just tell him. If they have a problem with your mental illness, that's not your problem, that's their problem. And just start every time, eat one person at a time. Just don't encourage the stigma by being ashamed of the fact that you have bipolar disorder. Nobody is ashamed of the fact that they have cancer. Sympathy pours out for folks with cancer. Nobody's ashamed of the fact that they have diabetes. As a kid, you might have a little bit of a hard time struggling with that, but there's no shame in that, and there should be no shame in folks that are living with, successfully or unsuccessfully, with mental illness. So, historically, the civil rights, as I said, though, used to be, I am somebody who is black, do not discriminate against me. I am somebody who is confined to a wheelchair, do not discriminate against me. I am somebody who is, of a different gender identity than you, or a different sexual orientation than you, do not discriminate against me. I believe what we need to do is change the discussion, or not change it, add to the discussion. I am somebody who is depressed, do not discriminate against me. I am somebody living with bipolar disorder, do not discriminate against me. I have schizophrenia, I have, a seasonal affective disorder. I had ADHD when I was a child, but now I'm a successful, lawyer, I'm a successful doctor. So this is kind of, as a state rep, what I'm trying to do is use the bully pulpit that I have to just raise this awareness and just talk about the need to no longer, think of mental illness as, something we should be ashamed of, something we should, keep from the public. It's one of the other articles that I wrote in HuffPost, and it's in the backbone, was titled "Understanding and Compassion: Essential Ingredients to Mental Health Reform." And that's a lot of what we have to overcome, challenge people with, because there's a lot of fear surrounding mental illness, with fear of keep the guns out of their hands, be afraid of them, be very afraid of them. And when you get rid of that fear, you can find compassion. And once you have a certain level of compassion, you find a passion for something. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with trying to help advocate for decreased stigma associated with mental illness. So, a couple things. Some things that I'm working on as a state rep. One of them is, like I said, just using, the bully pulpit of being a state rep to, address this issue. I write in my local newspaper about mental illness and mental health. I write in the Huffington Post. I submit articles all over the place. I used to write for the Metro West Daily News, the Milford Daily News, and just as an opinion columnist, I think once a month or so. But I have 4 things that I'm also working on, and this is something I would encourage you guys to, lobby or reach out to your own state reps, because I'm not your state rep. I'm a state rep from Attleboro, the 2nd Bristol District. You guys have Tom Sancandro here. He's a good friend of mine. We're actually at Kennedy School together. But reach out to folks and encourage them to sponsor and co-sponsor legislation that would make it so insurance companies start, paying for, compensating, mental illness, without restriction, because the trajectory, as everybody in the room knows, trajectory is sometimes, it can be a lot of relapse. It can go on for a long time. So, making sure there's full unfettered insurance access. Also, another thing I've been working on is trying to get my own police department in Attleboro better, police training, work with Department of Mental Health to get some CIT training, so that way when police show up at an event, or like an incident going on in somebody's house or in some public place, when they come across somebody who, is acting up, they know when to recognize this person's not resisting arrest or, being belligerent for the sake of being belligerent. They might be having an episode of something, maybe they missed medication for a little while, or, maybe it's the wrong kind of medication that they recently went on. So better police training is another one. Also, public awareness. Use the newspapers as much as possible. I do. I write, this, patch, these local patches all over the place, and you can write articles and, share your opinions about mental health. Sprinkle in some statistics in there, but just trying to educate the public, because a lot of people, this is not forefront of their mind unless something like Newtown happens and we need somebody to demonize. Then it's at the forefront of everyone's mind. Also, lastly, civil rights protections. So again, one of the things I'm working on trying to do is see about having more civil rights protections. So there's less discrimination or more consequences for discrimination against people living with successfully or unsuccessfully with mental illness. So with that, I would just like to say thank you very much for inviting me over today, and I'd be glad to take any of your questions, but I would also remind you I'm not a clinician, so I just know a little bit enough to be dangerous. So, yeah. But like I said, glad to take anybody's questions. So thank you.